when the bell in the clock tower last struck. In other words, in last week's episode, it's kind of been a little bit of a soap opera, hasn't it? When the bell last struck, Mr. Ebenezer Scrooge was beginning to crack open. Well, at least his heart. His heart was beginning to crack open. After visiting his long-forgotten past, both the great joys of it as well as the intense pain that was there, his heart was less empty. His heart was beginning to be refilled. And that made him more able to be present, more himself in his now, his time of present. He was still, however, in need of being shown how he had forged chain links between his own behavior as a businessman, as an employer, and the effect that had on his employees, the Cratchit family, and indeed the world around him. He needed to see that, to begin to see past what he thought he already knew, to be able to see the pain of others. His journey continues. Now, Ebenezer, like most of us, wanted things to be different going forward, but like most of us, he really didn't want to be bothered with going back to the past, and nor did he really want to have a hard look at what was happening right now. You know how that is, don't you? We hear people say, "Why does she keep bringing up white racism?" Well, I will until it ends. Why do we need to talk about sexuality in the church? Because there are people who suffer discrimination and ignorance and violence and hostility right now. And I'm not talking politics. Well, I will. And I hope you will. For the simple and the sacred reason that real people's lives depend on the choices we make in public policy in this nation and beyond into the world. Most of us would rather hide from the past, from our past. And many of us don't really want to see what's true about our present. And that, friends, binds all the possibilities for tomorrow in very heavy, heavy, heavy chains. Now, most of us go about our daily lives allowing the future to just kind of seep into our now. We don't really give it much thought. But the future came looking for Ebenezer Scrooge. And he was waiting for it in great fear, with great fear and trembling. Dickens said, "The room was very dark, too dark to see accurately." What are we afraid of in the future? Why is the future so scary? What do we fear about it? Any thoughts? The unknown. Why do we need to know the unknown? Why do we think we do? Because what? We can't prepare. What do we want to prepare for? What does it mean to prepare? We want to control it, right? We want to decide what's going to happen and what's not going to happen. Of course we do. There's longing in our hearts. And it's dark. The future is scary because it's dark. We can't see into it. We can't see if those longings will come about, will come to us or not. It's dark, and we can't see. We can see what direction we're headed, but we don't know whether we will arrive there. Here's a little test. Does anyone recognize this little tiny bit of text from the Gospel of John? It ends a sentence. And it was night. Anybody want to hazard a guess? I bet you never read it the same again. This is how John, the gospel writer, introduces the arrest, the trial, and the execution of Jesus. And it was night. It's dark. Now, perhaps that was historically correct. I don't know. But I do know that John wants you to see the night, the darkness. He wants you to understand it has much less to do with the sunset than it does with our inability to see what happens next. The darkness of the future. Jesus was not in control of his passion. He did not control those around him. He made his choices, but he did not control the events of his passion and his death. How about these words? Same gospel, a few chapters later. Anyone recognize this? While it was still dark. What? What? The women went to the tomb, and this is how John introduces the resurrection. John wants you to understand it was still dark. The resurrection did not eliminate darkness. It did not make it go away. It happened in spite of it. While it was still dark, Christ rose from the dead. Many years ago, a man came to the church office and asked if he could see me, and so I sat down with him in my office, and he explained that he had come because he had been a young man growing up in that congregation, and when he had volunteered as one of the ushers. And one Sunday, when no one was looking, he put his hand in the offering plate and took some money out. And he had come back that day to make amends. You see, he had begun a journey, a lifelong journey of 12 very deep, big steps. And he put a wad of money on my desk. And I was deeply moved by his act of confession. that he had come back to take responsibility for his life. And I was delighted that he had even chosen to move in the direction of the light of resurrection, of a new life. But it was many years later, several years later, before I learned that his alcoholism had its roots in our congregational life. He was one of several boys who were abused by our youth director. Alcohol and drug use claimed most of his young adult years and his adult years. And looking back later, I saw in his act that day our redemption. Because it was an act of grace for him to come back to us, we who failed to protect him and the other boys from darkness. He came back to offer us God's grace in his own healing, in his own redemption, became part of ours. We spent a lot of time in that congregation, 3 full years of redemption work. God spent 3 years redeeming that event. Scrooge says, "Assure me that I yet may change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life." Isn't that what we want in the face of a future we can't look into? An assurance. We offer that in our communion liturgy. An assurance. The ghost of Christmas yet to come shows Scrooge a two-sided coin. On the one side is the certainty of his death. Any of us here today uncertain about that? And the other side of that same coin shines and glows with all the possibilities of a life lived, as Paul would say, unselfishly or in the Spirit. Two-sided coin, brothers and sisters. Scrooge finally lands on the right question. Are these shadows of things that will be or only things that may be? That's the right question. It's just misdirected, right? Because only Scrooge can answer it. I am so proud to share with you that our Fijian young adults spent yesterday morning answering the question, will or may, by sharing the goods that they had collected with those who are unsheltered among God's children down